The bullet shattered the mirror behind the bar, sending shards of glass raining down like deadly snowflakes. And Zelda Dawson knew she had exactly 3 seconds to decide whether to duck or draw the Colt revolver hidden beneath her skirts. It was September of 1878 in Eureka, Nevada, and the Silver Strike Saloon had just become the latest casualty in what the locals called another Tuesday night. Zelda chose neither option, instead stepping directly into the line of fire with her hands raised, her green eyes blazing with the kind of fury that made grown men reconsider their life choices. Enough. Her voice cut through the chaos like a knife through butter. You want to shoot each other over a card game. You take it outside my establishment. The 2 miners, both drunk on whiskey and wounded pride, lowered their weapons slowly. They knew Zelda Dawson, knew her reputation, knew that crossing the woman who ran the most profitable saloon in Eureka was a mistake that could cost them more than just their drinking privileges. She had built this place from nothing after her husband died in a mining accident 3 years prior, and she had done it without compromising herself to any man who thought a widow should be grateful for his protection. My apologies, Miss Dawson, the taller miner mumbled, shoving his pistol back into his holster. We will settle this elsewhere. See that you do. Zelda's tone softened slightly, but her posture remained rigid. And Harold, you will pay for that mirror. After the men stumbled out into the dusty street, Zelda turned to survey the damage. The mirror had been expensive, imported all the way from San Francisco, and now it lay in ruins. She pressed her fingers to her temples, feeling the familiar throb of a headache building behind her eyes. Running a saloon as a woman in a mining town meant constantly proving herself, constantly being twice as tough and 3 times as smart as any man who thought he could intimidate her into submission or marriage, whichever came first. You handled that well. The voice came from the corner table where a stranger sat nursing a whiskey. Zelda had noticed him earlier in the evening, a tall man with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that fell just past his collar. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, dusty denim and a worn leather vest, but something about the way he carried himself suggested he was more than just another drifter passing through town. I have had plenty of practice, Zelda replied, moving behind the bar to sweep up the glass. Are you planning to cause trouble too, or are you just here to observe? The stranger stood and walked toward the bar, moving with a deliberate grace that reminded Zelda of a mountain cat. Up close, she could see his eyes were a startling shade of gray, like storm clouds gathering over the Ruby Mountains. He appeared to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most, with a strong jaw and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. Name is Owen Gallagher, he said, extending his hand across the bar. And I am here on business, though not the kind you might be thinking. Zelda hesitated before shaking his hand, noting the calluses that spoke of years of hard work. What kind of business brings a cowboy to Eureka? We are mining country, in case you had not noticed. I noticed. Owen's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes that Zelda could not quite read. I am looking for someone to invest in a cattle operation. I have been working ranches from Texas to Montana for the past 12 years, saving every dollar, and I am ready to start my own spread. Word around town is that you have more business sense than any banker in Nevada. Zelda laughed, a short, bitter sound. Word around town also says I am too stubborn for my own good, too independent to attract a decent husband, and too ambitious for a woman. Which rumor brought you to my door, Mr. Gallagher? The one about business sense, Owen replied without missing a beat. I do not care about the rest. There was something disarming about his directness, and Zelda found herself studying him more carefully. Most men who approached her wanted something beyond business, wanted to possess her along with her property, or thought they could charm their way into her bed and her bank account. Owen Gallagher watched her with what appeared to be genuine interest in her mind rather than her body, though she caught him glancing at her face with an appreciation that was different from the usual leering she endured. "I am listening," she said finally, pouring herself a whiskey and gesturing for him to continue. Owen laid out his proposal with the precision of someone who had thought through every detail. He had found a stretch of rangeland 2 days' ride north of Eureka, near the Humboldt River, where the grass grew thick and the water ran clean. He had enough money saved to purchase a small herd and basic supplies, but he needed capital for the land itself and for hired help to get through the first difficult year. In exchange for investment, he would offer a percentage of the profits once the operation became profitable. "Why me?" Zelda asked when he finished. "There are plenty of wealthy men in this town who could fund your venture." "Because they would want control," Owen said simply. "They would want to tell me how to run my own ranch, would want their names on everything, would want to own me along with the cattle. You understand what it means to build something on your own terms. I am not looking for a master. I am looking for a partner." Zelda set down her glass with a sharp click. "I am not interested in being anyone's partner, Mr. Gallagher. I learned that lesson the hard way." "A business partner," Owen clarified. "Nothing more, nothing less. You invest the money, I do the work. We split the profits according to whatever terms you find fair. And what makes you think I have that kind of capital to spare?" Owen smiled slightly, the first real expression she had seen cross his face. "Because you did not flinch when I mentioned the amount, and because your saloon brings in more money in a week than most mines produce in a month. You are smart enough to know that diversifying your investments is good business." He was right, and Zelda hated that he was right. She had been thinking about expanding beyond the saloon, about finding ways to grow her wealth that did not depend on drunk miners and gambling tables. But she had also learned not to trust men who showed up with proposals that seemed too good to be true. "I will think about it," she said finally. "Come back tomorrow evening and we can discuss terms if I decide to move forward." Owen nodded, finishing his whiskey in one smooth motion. "That is all I ask. Thank you for your time, Miss Dawson." After he left, Zelda found herself unable to focus on her usual evening routine of tallying receipts and managing the bar staff. Owen Gallagher had gotten under her skin somehow, with his straightforward manner and his refusal to treat her like either a conquest or a curiosity. She had spent the past 3 years building walls around herself, refusing to let anyone close enough to hurt her again. And she was not about to let some cowboy with storm-gray eyes and a cattle dream breach her defenses. But business was business, and if the opportunity was sound, she would be foolish to pass it up simply because the man proposing it unsettled her in ways she could not quite name. The next morning, Zelda rode out to speak with Thomas Whitmore, the lawyer who handled her affairs. Thomas was one of the few men in Eureka who treated her with respect rather than condescension, perhaps because his own wife had proven herself equally capable in business matters. She laid out Owen's proposal and asked him to look into the cowboy's background. "Owen Gallagher," Thomas mused, writing the name down. "I will send some telegrams, see what I can find out. In the meantime, I would advise caution. These cattle ventures are risky, especially for someone without established connections in the ranching community." "I am aware of the risks," Zelda replied, "but I am also aware that I cannot grow my business by playing it safe forever." Thomas smiled at her over his spectacles. "You sound like Margaret. She said the same thing when she wanted to open the dress shop. Now it is the most successful store in town." "How is Margaret?" Zelda asked, grateful for the change of subject. "Pregnant again," Thomas said with a mixture of pride and concern. "The third child in 4 years. I worry about her health, but she insists she is strong enough to manage both the shop and a growing family." Zelda felt the familiar pang of something she refused to name as jealousy. She had wanted children once, had imagined a house full of laughter and love, but her husband's death had ended those dreams along with so many others. At 26, she was considered past her prime by most standards, too old to attract the kind of husband who might give her the family she occasionally longed for in her weakest moments. But she had learned to bury those longings beneath layers of practicality and ambition. She had built a life that depended on no one but herself, and that was enough. It had to be enough. Owen returned to the saloon that evening just as the sun was setting, painting the Nevada sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded Zelda of the precious opals miners sometimes found in the nearby hills. He looked cleaner than the previous night, his hair damp as though he had recently bathed, and he carried himself with the same quiet confidence that had caught her attention before. "Miss Dawson," he greeted her with a slight nod. "Have you reached a decision?" "I have questions first," Zelda replied, gesturing for him to take a seat at her private table in the back corner. "Starting with why a man who has been working ranches for 12 years does not have enough saved to fund this venture himself." Owen did not seem offended by the directness of her question. "Because I spent the first 5 years sending money home to my mother and sisters in Kansas after my father died. The ranch we worked went under during a drought, and they needed help to survive. By the time they were stable again, I was starting from scratch. Where are they now? My mother passed 2 years ago. My sisters are both married with families of their own. Good men, good lives. I am free to pursue my own dreams now without worrying about anyone depending on me." Zelda appreciated his honesty, even as she wondered what it said about him that he had sacrificed his own ambitions for his family. In her experience, men rarely put anyone's needs before their own. "Tell me about your experience with cattle," she said, pouring them both whiskey from the good bottle she kept for special occasions. Owen spent the next hour describing his years working ranches across the West, from the sprawling spreads of Texas to the smaller operations in Montana and Wyoming. He spoke with the easy confidence of someone who knew his subject intimately, discussing everything from breeding techniques to market prices to the challenges of managing a herd through harsh winters. Zelda found herself impressed despite her initial skepticism, and she had to admit that his knowledge seemed genuine and comprehensive. "Why Eureka?" she asked finally. "Why here specifically?" "Because the mining town needs beef," Owen replied. "And because the land near the Humboldt River is some of the best grazing country I have seen that has not already been claimed by the big operations. I can build something sustainable there, something that will last beyond the mines. When the silver runs out, and it will eventually, cattle will still have value." It was sound reasoning, the kind of long-term thinking that Zelda employed in her own business dealings. The mines would not last forever, and having investments that extended beyond Eureka's boom and bust cycle was smart planning. "My lawyer is looking into your background," Zelda said bluntly. "If anything you have told me proves to be false, this conversation ends immediately." "I would expect nothing less," Owen replied. "I am not asking you to trust me blindly. I am asking you to trust the facts once you have verified them." They spent another hour hammering out the potential terms of their partnership. Zelda would provide the capital for the land purchase and initial operating expenses, while Owen would contribute his labor and expertise. Profits would be split 60-40 in Zelda's favor until her initial investment was repaid. then 50-50 thereafter. Owen would have full operational control, but Zelda would receive quarterly reports and have the right to inspect the operation at any time. "There is one more thing," Owen said as they were concluding their discussion. "I need to know that you trust me to run this operation my way. I have worked for enough men who thought they knew ranching better than I did despite never having spent a day in the saddle. If you invest in this venture, I need your word that you will not try to micromanage every decision." Zelda considered this, recognizing the same fierce independence in him that she valued in herself. "I will not interfere in the daily operations," she agreed. "But if I see something that concerns me from a business perspective, I will speak up. I did not build what I have by keeping my mouth shut." "I would not expect you to," Owen said, and there was something in his voice that suggested he genuinely meant it. "I am not looking for a silent partner, Miss Dawson. I am looking for someone smart enough to ask the right questions and honest enough to tell me when I am wrong." It was such a refreshing change from the usual patronizing attitude. She encountered that Zelda felt something crack in the armor she had built around herself. She quickly reinforced it, reminding herself that business relationships and personal feelings needed to remain separate if she wanted to protect herself from future hurt. "Wait for my lawyer's report," she said, standing to signal the end of their meeting. "If everything checks out, we can move forward with drawing up the papers." Owen stood as well, extending his hand once more. "Thank you for giving this serious consideration. I know I am asking you to take a risk on someone you just met." "I am always taking risks," Zelda replied, shaking his hand firmly. "The question is whether those risks are calculated or foolish. I will let you know which category you fall into once I have more information." 3 days later, Thomas Whitmore delivered his report. Owen Gallagher was exactly who he claimed to be, a hard-working cowboy with an excellent reputation among the ranchers he had worked for over the years. Multiple former employers had responded to telegrams praising his skill with cattle, his integrity, and his work ethic. There were no debts, no criminal record, no indication of dishonesty or unreliability. "If I were going to invest in a cattle operation," Thomas concluded, "I would feel comfortable doing so with Mr. Gallagher. Of course, there are still market risks and environmental factors to consider, but as far as the man himself goes, he appears to be legitimate." Zelda made her decision. She would fund Owen's ranch, not because she was attracted to him, which she firmly told herself she was not, but because it was a sound business opportunity that aligned with her long-term financial strategy. The fact that she found herself looking forward to their next meeting was entirely irrelevant and would not factor into her professional conduct. The paperwork took another week to finalize, during which Owen found work at the livery stable to pay for his room and board. Zelda caught glimpses of him around town, always working, always focused, never spending his evenings in the saloon gambling and drinking like so many other men. He seemed content with his own company, reading books in his room at the boarding house or maintaining his horse and gear with meticulous care. When the contracts were finally ready, they met at Thomas's office to sign the papers. Zelda read through every word carefully, ignoring Thomas's amused expression as she questioned several minor points and insisted on clarifications. Owen waited patiently, seeming to understand that her thoroughness was not a reflection of distrust, but rather a fundamental aspect of how she conducted business. "Satisfied?" Thomas asked when she finally set down the document. "Satisfied," Zelda confirmed, picking up the pen and signing her name with a flourish. Owen signed next, his handwriting surprisingly elegant for someone who worked with his hands. "Congratulations," Thomas said, shaking both their hands. "You are now business partners." "I will head north tomorrow to start the land purchase process," Owen said as they left the lawyer's office. "It will probably take me a week to finalize everything and get the initial supplies in place. After that, I will send you regular updates as promised." "I want to come with you," Zelda said impulsively, surprising herself as much as Owen. "I should see the property before you make the purchase final. It is only sound business practice to inspect what I am investing in." Owen looked at her carefully, and Zelda braced herself for the usual arguments about danger, impropriety, or feminine delicacy. Instead, he simply nodded. "That is reasonable. The ride is rough, and the accommodations will be primitive. But if you are prepared for that, I would welcome your input on the land selection." His casual acceptance of her desire to be involved left Zelda momentarily speechless. She had been prepared to fight for her right to see the property, had already marshaled a dozen arguments about why she should be allowed to protect her investment. Having those arguments rendered unnecessary was disorienting in the best possible way. "I will be ready at dawn," she said, recovering her composure. "I assume we will need camping supplies." "I will handle the supplies," Owen replied. "You just bring yourself and whatever personal items you need. We will be gone for about a week, so plan accordingly." That evening, as Zelda packed her saddlebags, her closest friend and head bartender, Sarah Mitchell, watched with barely concealed concern. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, folding one of Zelda's split riding skirts with practiced efficiency. "Riding off into the wilderness with a man you barely know." "It is a business trip," Zelda replied firmly, "and I can handle myself. I have not survived 3 years running this saloon without learning how to deal with difficult situations." "I know you can handle yourself," Sarah said gently. "I am more worried about your heart than your safety. I have seen the way you look at him when you think no one is watching." Zelda's hands stilled on the shirt she was packing. "I do not know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Sarah moved to sit beside her on the bed, taking Zelda's hand in her own. "And there is nothing wrong with it, Zelda. You have been alone for 3 years, punishing yourself for something that was not your fault. Maybe it is time to let someone in again." "I cannot," Zelda whispered, the words torn from somewhere deep inside her. "I cannot be what men want, Sarah. I am too stubborn, too independent, too ambitious. My husband told me that often enough before he died. He said I was a disappointment, that I should have been softer, more obedient, more content with my place. I will not change myself for another man, but I also will not subject anyone to the failure I represent." Sarah squeezed her hand fiercely. "Your husband was a fool who could not handle a strong woman. That was his failure, not yours. And if Owen Gallagher is half as smart as he seems, he will see you for who you really are and value it." Zelda wanted to believe her friend, wanted to imagine that someone could accept her without requiring her to diminish herself. But years of criticism had left scars that ran deep. She had learned to protect herself by keeping everyone at arm's length, by reducing all relationships to business transactions that could not wound her heart. But as she finished packing and tried to sleep, she could not stop thinking about the way Owen had looked at her during their conversations, with respect and interest rather than judgment or desire to control. She could not stop remembering the feeling of his hand in hers, calloused and warm and steady. She told herself it meant nothing, that she was simply tired and emotional, that morning would bring back her usual pragmatic perspective. But deep down, in a place she rarely acknowledged, she knew that something had already shifted, and there was no going back to the safety of her emotional isolation. Dawn came cold and clear, with frost glittering on the wooden sidewalks of Eureka's main street. Zelda dressed in her practical riding clothes, sturdy boots and split skirts that allowed her to ride astride rather than side saddle. She braided her long auburn hair into a practical plait, then covered it with a wide-brimmed hat that would protect her face from the sun. Owen was waiting outside the livery stable with 2 horses and a pack mule loaded with supplies. He had cleaned up well, shaved and dressed in clean trail clothes, but what struck Zelda most was the way his face brightened when he saw her approaching. "Ready?" he asked, checking the cinch on her saddle one more time. "Ready," Zelda confirmed, mounting her horse with practiced ease. She had learned to ride as a child growing up on a farm in Illinois, and while she did not ride often in Eureka, the skill came back naturally. They rode out of town just as the sun was breaking over the mountains, painting the sagebrush desert in shades of gold and amber. The first few hours passed in companionable silence, both of them focused on the rhythm of the horses and the gradual warming of the day. The landscape around Eureka was harsh but beautiful, all rocky peaks and rolling valleys dotted with juniper and pinon pine. As the sun climbed higher, Owen began pointing out features of the land, explaining how to read the terrain for signs of water and good grazing. Zelda listened carefully, filing away information that might prove useful in evaluating the property they were riding toward. But she also found herself simply enjoying the journey, the freedom of being away from the saloon and its constant demands, the pleasure of moving through open country with someone who did not feel the need to fill every silence with meaningless chatter. They stopped for lunch beside a small creek, letting the horses drink and rest while they ate the bread and cheese Owen had packed. Zelda sat on a flat rock, stretching her legs and watching the water tumble over smooth stones. "You ride well," Owen observed, sitting down nearby. "I was half expecting to have to adjust our pace, but you have kept up without any trouble." "I grew up on a farm," Zelda explained. "My father believed girls should know how to handle horses and livestock as well as any boy. It drove my mother crazy, but I loved it." "What brought you to Nevada?" Zelda hesitated, not sure how much of her story she wanted to share. But something about the peaceful setting and Owen's patient presence made her want to open up just a little. "My husband," she said finally. "Robert Dawson. We married when I was 21, and he had dreams of striking it rich in the silver mines. We came to Eureka in '75, full of hope and ambition. He worked the mines for 2 years before a tunnel collapse took his life." "I am sorry," Owen said quietly, and the sympathy in his voice sounded genuine rather than perfunctory. "I was devastated at first," Zelda continued, surprised at how much she wanted to tell him. "But then I got angry. Angry at him for leaving me. Angry at myself for being dependent on him. Angry at a world that expected me to either remarry quickly or return home in shame. So I took the small amount of money we had saved and bought the silver strike from a miner who wanted to sell and move on. Everyone said I would fail within a month. But you did not." "No, I did not. I learned the business from the ground up, worked harder than I had ever worked in my life, and proved everyone wrong. The saloon became successful, and I became the woman I should have been all along, independent and strong." Owen was quiet for a moment, studying her with those storm-gray eyes. "Your husband, did he support your strength?" Zelda laughed bitterly. "No. Robert wanted a traditional wife, someone who would cook his meals and bear his children and never question his decisions. He found my opinions inconvenient and my ambitions unfeminine. We fought constantly about it. Sometimes I think his death was a relief for both of us, and then I hate myself for thinking that way." "Sounds like he was the wrong man for you," Owen said simply. "Not that you were the wrong woman for him. There is a difference." The distinction settled into Zelda's chest like a warm stone. She had spent 3 years believing that she was the problem, that her inability to be soft and compliant had somehow caused her marriage to fail. Hearing Owen frame it differently, suggesting that Robert had simply been incompatible with who she truly was, opened up a possibility she had not allowed herself to consider. "What about you?" she asked, wanting to shift the focus away from her own painful history. "You are what, 29, 30, never married?" 28, Owen corrected with a slight smile. "And no, never married. I came close once when I was working a ranch in Colorado. Sweet girl, daughter of the ranch owner. We courted for about 6 months before I realized she wanted me to give up cowboying and work in her father's office, managing paperwork and accounts. She had this whole vision of who I should become, and it did not include the life I actually wanted. So you left." "So I left," Owen agreed. "Broke her heart and my own in the process. But I knew I could not be who she needed me to be without losing myself. Better to end it cleanly than to spend years resenting each other." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, both processing what the other had shared. Zelda felt a connection forming between them, built on mutual understanding of what it meant to choose authenticity over acceptance. It was dangerous, this feeling of kinship, but she found herself unable to pull back from it. As they remounted and continued north, Zelda caught herself watching Owen from the corner of her eye, noting the confident way he sat his horse, the easy strength in his movements. She was attracted to him. She could admit that much to herself, drawn not just to his physical presence but to the way he treated her as an equal, never trying to diminish her or mold her into something she was not. But attraction was dangerous, led to vulnerability and pain and disappointment. She had to remember that this was a business arrangement, nothing more. Even if a treacherous part of her heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, this could be something different. They made camp that evening in a sheltered valley with a small spring that provided fresh water for the horses. Owen set up their sleeping rolls on opposite sides of the fire, with a careful distance that Zelda appreciated even as part of her wished he had placed them closer together. She was losing her mind, she decided, letting schoolgirl fantasies cloud her judgment. As they sat by the fire after dinner, Owen pulled out a harmonica from his saddlebag and played a few soft, melancholy tunes that drifted up into the star-filled sky. Zelda leaned back on her bedroll, watching the flames dance and listening to the music, feeling more at peace than she had in months. "My father taught me," Owen said when he finished the song. "He said every cowboy should know how to make music, because the lonely nights are easier when you have something to fill the silence." "It is beautiful," Zelda said honestly. "Will you play another?" Owen obliged, this time choosing a livelier tune that made Zelda's foot tap in time with the rhythm. When he finished, she found herself applauding softly, and his answering smile was so genuine and unguarded that it made something flutter in her chest. "Your turn," he said, holding out the harmonica. "Everyone has some kind of talent. What is yours?" "I used to sing," Zelda admitted reluctantly. "My mother taught me when I was young, but I have not sung in years, not since before I married." "Why not?" "Robert said my voice was too loud, too bold. He preferred women who sang softly and sweetly, not women who filled a room with sound." Owen's expression hardened slightly. "I am beginning to think your husband was a damned fool, pardon my language." Zelda laughed despite herself. "He was a lot of things, but mostly he was just a man who wanted a different kind of wife than the one he got." "Then he should have married someone else," Owen said firmly. "When I commit to someone, it will be because I want exactly who they are, not some imagined version I think they should become." The intensity in his voice sent heat through Zelda's body, and she had to look away from him before she did something foolish like lean across the fire and kiss him. This was happening too fast, these feelings building too quickly, and she needed to regain control before she made a mistake that could ruin their business partnership and her emotional equilibrium. "I should sleep," she said abruptly, sliding into her bedroll and turning her back to the fire. "We have a long ride tomorrow." "Good night, Zelda," Owen said softly, and the sound of her first name on his lips sent shivers down her spine. She lay awake for a long time, listening to the pop and crackle of the fire and the sound of Owen's steady breathing as he fell asleep. She was in trouble, she knew, falling for a man she barely knew, letting her guard down after years of careful isolation. But she could not seem to stop herself, could not seem to rebuild the walls fast enough to keep him out. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and she dreamed of storm-gray eyes and calloused hands, and a voice that said her name like it was something precious. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern of long rides through increasingly beautiful country, evening camps beside mountain streams or springs, and conversations that ranged from business matters to personal histories. Owen proved to be an excellent traveling companion, competent and considerate, always making sure Zelda was comfortable without being patronizing about it. They reached the Humboldt River country on the 4th day, and Zelda had to admit that Owen had been right about the quality of the land. Rolling grasslands stretched in every direction, punctuated by groves of cottonwood trees along the river and distant mountains that provided both scenic beauty and natural windbreaks. The grass grew thick and green despite the late summer heat, sustained by the river and numerous springs that bubbled up from underground sources. "What do you think?" Owen asked as they sat their horses on a rise overlooking the valley. "It is perfect," Zelda admitted. "Better than I expected, honestly." "How much land are we talking about?" "The parcel I am looking at is about 500 acres along this stretch of river. Enough room to support a decent herd without overgrazing, with room to expand if the operation grows successful." They spent the rest of the day riding the property boundaries, with Owen pointing out the natural features that made this land ideal for cattle ranching. Zelda asked questions about water rights, access to markets, and potential challenges, and Owen answered each one thoughtfully, clearly having considered every aspect of his plan in detail. By the time they made camp that evening, Zelda was convinced that the investment was sound. But more than that, she was impressed by Owen's knowledge and passion for the work. He talked about cattle ranching the way she talked about business, with a combination of practical expertise and genuine love for the craft. "I will approve the land purchase," she said as they ate dinner by the fire. "I think you have chosen well, and I believe this operation has a strong chance of success." Owen's face lit up with a smile that transformed his usually serious expression into something almost boyish. "Thank you. You will not regret this, Zelda. I will work myself to the bone to make sure this ranch succeeds." "I know you will," Zelda replied, returning his smile. "I would not have invested otherwise." "There is something I need to tell you," Owen said after a pause, his expression turning more serious. "I have been trying to keep this professional, to maintain appropriate boundaries given that we are business partners. But I would be lying if I said I did not have feelings for you beyond the professional realm." Zelda's heart began to pound, panic and hope warring in her chest. "Owen, I do not think, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I am not asking you for anything. I am not expecting you to return my feelings or to change our arrangement in any way. I just wanted to be honest with you because I do not believe in hiding the truth. I find you remarkable, Zelda. Your strength, your intelligence, your determination to live life on your own terms, it all draws me to you in ways I have never experienced before." "I cannot be what men want," Zelda said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I cannot be soft or obedient or content to live in someone's shadow. I tried that once and failed miserably. I will not change myself again, not even for someone I. She stopped herself before she could complete the thought. Owen moved around the fire to sit beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. "Be what you are," he said quietly. "That is enough. More than enough. I do not want you to change, Zelda. I want exactly who you are right now, fierce and independent and brilliant." Tears stung Zelda's eyes and she blinked them back furiously. "You say that now, but eventually you will want me to be different. All men do. They think they want a strong woman until she actually shows her strength, and then they spend all their time trying to break her down into something manageable." "I am not all men," Owen replied, and there was steel beneath the gentleness in his voice. "And I am not asking you to trust me blindly. I am asking you to give me a chance to prove that I mean what I say. Take all the time you need. Keep your walls up until you are ready to lower them. But please do not dismiss the possibility of us simply because other men were too weak to handle you." Zelda turned to look at him, really look at him, and saw nothing but sincerity in his eyes. He was not trying to manipulate her or charm her into submission. He was simply laying his heart out with the same straightforward honesty he had shown in all their business dealings. "I am scared," she whispered, the admission costing her dearly. "I am terrified of being hurt again, of losing myself in someone else's expectations." "I am scared too," Owen admitted. "Scared that I will do something wrong, say something that pushes you away, fail to live up to what you need. But I would rather be scared and honest than safe and alone." They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sounds the crackling fire and the distant call of a night bird. Then, moving slowly to give her time to pull away, Owen reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough against hers, and Zelda felt something inside her chest crack open, letting in light she had denied herself for far too long. "I have feelings for you too," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have been trying to ignore them, trying to keep this purely business, but I cannot seem to stop myself from caring about you." "Then do not stop," Owen said simply. "Let yourself feel it. We do not have to rush anything or make any grand declarations. We can just see where this goes, one day at a time." Zelda squeezed his hand, marveling at how right it felt to have her fingers intertwined with his. "One day at a time," she agreed. "But if you start trying to change me or tell me what to do, you will cut me off at the knees and I will deserve it," Owen finished with a slight smile. "I understand the terms, Zelda. Be who you are and I will do the same. We will figure out the rest as we go." That night, they moved their bedrolls closer together, not touching but near enough that Zelda could hear Owen's breathing as she fell asleep. It was a small step, but it felt monumental, this gradual lowering of her defenses to let someone in. The return journey to Eureka took another 4 days, but the atmosphere between them had shifted into something warmer, more open. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts and dreams for their futures. Owen told her about his childhood in Kansas, about learning to rope and ride from his father, about the pain of watching his family's ranch fail despite everyone's best efforts. Zelda shared memories of her own childhood, of her father's progressive ideas about women's education, and her mother's struggle to accept a daughter who refused to conform to traditional expectations. They also talked about practical matters, making plans for the ranch operation, and discussing how they would coordinate their business relationship with their developing personal one. Both agreed that the ranch should remain Owen's domain, with Zelda maintaining her oversight role as investor but not trying to manage the daily operations. "I trust you to run the ranch," Zelda said firmly. "And I expect you to trust me to run my saloon without interference." "I would not dream of telling you how to manage your business," Owen replied. "I barely understand how saloons work beyond the basics of drinking and gambling." "Good," Zelda said with satisfaction. "Then we should be able to avoid most of the conflicts that destroy partnerships." "Most of them," Owen agreed with a grin. "I am sure we will find new and creative ways to argue." "Undoubtedly," Zelda replied, grinning back. "But at least we will be arguing as equals." When they finally rode back into Eureka a week after their departure, Zelda felt like a different person than the one who had left. She was still strong and independent, still determined to live life on her own terms, but she had opened a door she thought she had sealed shut forever. The possibility of love, of partnership, of building something with someone who saw her strength as an asset rather than a flaw. It shimmered before her like a mirage that might actually turn out to be real. Sarah was waiting at the saloon when Zelda returned, and one look at her friend's face told Zelda that the change must be visible. "What happened?" Sarah demanded as soon as they were alone in Zelda's office. "You look different, lighter somehow." Zelda tried to maintain her composure but found herself smiling despite her best efforts. "Nothing happened. We looked at the land, I approved the purchase, we came back. It was a business trip." "Liar," Sarah said affectionately. "You are glowing. Tell me everything right now, or I will be forced to make up scandalous stories and spread them all over town." So Zelda told her, leaving out the most intimate details but sharing the essence of what had transpired between her and Owen. Sarah listened with growing delight, occasionally interrupting with exclamations of approval or encouragement. "I knew it," Sarah said triumphantly when Zelda finished. "I knew he was different from the moment I saw how he looked at you. This is wonderful, Zelda. You deserve happiness." "I do not know if it will work," Zelda cautioned, not wanting to get too carried away. "We are still figuring things out, and there is so much that could go wrong." "Or so much that could go right," Sarah countered. "Stop looking for reasons to be afraid and start looking for reasons to be hopeful." Over the following weeks, Owen divided his time between finalizing the land purchase and spending evenings with Zelda. They fell into a comfortable routine of late dinners after the saloon's rush, talking for hours about everything under the sun. Owen never pressured her for more than she was ready to give, content to build their relationship slowly and carefully. He also proved himself around town, taking on odd jobs to fund his basic expenses while the ranch purchase was being processed. Zelda watched him work at the livery stable, at the general store, even helping repair the church roof, despite admitting he was not particularly religious. He earned respect through his work ethic and his respectful treatment of everyone he encountered, from the wealthiest mine owner to the poorest laborer. "Your cowboy is making quite an impression," Thomas Whitmore remarked to Zelda one afternoon when she stopped by his office with some paperwork. "I've heard nothing but good things about Owen Gallagher. Margaret says he was incredibly patient when helping her carry supplies to the dress shop, and you know how particular she is about propriety." "He is not my cowboy," Zelda protested, but her heart was not in the denial. Thomas smiled knowingly. "If you say so, but for what it is worth, I think he is good for you. I have known you for 3 years, Zelda, and I have never seen you smile as much as you have in the past month." Zelda could not argue with that. She was happier, lighter, more willing to laugh and let her guard down. Owen had somehow slipped past her defenses without breaching them, meeting her where she was rather than demanding she come to him. One evening, about 6 weeks after their trip to the Humboldt River country, Owen arrived at the saloon with a package wrapped in brown paper. "What is this?" Zelda asked, eyeing the package suspiciously. She had made it clear that she did not want expensive gifts or grand romantic gestures, preferring straightforward honesty to elaborate courting rituals. "Open it and see," Owen said with a mysterious smile. Inside the package was a book, the leather cover worn but well-maintained. Zelda opened it carefully and found herself looking at a collection of poetry by Emily Dickinson, published just a few years earlier. "How did you know I like poetry?" she asked, touched despite herself. "You quoted Wordsworth during one of our conversations last week," Owen replied. "And I saw you reading a book of Whitman poems in your office. I thought you might enjoy this. Dickinson writes about independence and strength in ways that reminded me of you." Zelda paged through the book, reading random verses that indeed seemed to speak to her experiences and perspectives. It was a thoughtful gift, chosen based on actual knowledge of her interests rather than generic assumptions about what women liked. "Thank you," she said softly. "This is perfect." "You are perfect," Owen replied, then held up a hand before she could protest. "Not perfect as in flawless, perfect as in exactly right the way you are. I wanted you to know that I see you, Zelda. All of you, not just the parts that fit some ideal in my head." Zelda set the book down carefully and moved closer to him, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. They had shared a few brief kisses over the past weeks, careful explorations that hinted at deeper passion held carefully in check. But something about this moment felt different, more significant. "I am falling in love with you," she said, the words both terrifying and liberating. "And it scares me more than anything I have ever experienced." "I am already in love with you," Owen replied, cupping her face gently in his calloused hands. "Have been since that first night when you stepped into the line of fire to stop a bar fight. But I am scared too, scared that I will fail you somehow, disappoint you." "We will probably fail each other sometimes," Zelda said honestly. "But as long as we keep talking, keep being honest, maybe we can work through it." "Maybe we can," Owen agreed. And then he was kissing her with a passion that made her forget about fear and walls and all the reasons she had convinced herself love was too dangerous to risk. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zelda rested her forehead against his and let herself simply feel the joy of being wanted exactly as she was. "Stay with me tonight," she whispered. "Not in the saloon, but at my house. I want to be with you, really be with you. Are you sure?" Owen asked, pulling back slightly to search her face. "I do not want you to rush into anything you are not ready for." "I am ready," Zelda said firmly. "I am tired of being afraid. I want to choose hope instead." They walked together through the quiet streets of Eureka to Zelda's small house behind the saloon, hands clasped tightly together. Inside, with the door closed against the world, they came together with a mixture of tenderness and urgency that left them both breathless and transformed. Afterward, lying tangled together in Zelda's bed, Owen traced gentle patterns on her bare shoulder and said, "I want to marry you. Not now necessarily, not until you are ready, but eventually. I want to build a life with you, want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night." Zelda felt panic flutter in her chest, old fears rising up to protect her. "I cannot be a traditional wife. I will not give up the saloon or let anyone dictate my choices." "I do not want a traditional wife," Owen said patiently. "I want you, Zelda Dawson, saloon owner and businesswoman and fierce, independent spirit. I want a partner, not a possession. Someone who will challenge me and support me and build something amazing alongside me." "What about children?" Zelda asked, voicing one of her deepest fears. "I am 26. If we wait too long, I might not be able to have them, and I know most men want sons to carry on their name. If we have children, I will love them, Owen said simply. If we do not, I will still love you. My happiness is not contingent on producing heirs. My happiness is contingent on spending my life with you, however that life shapes up. Tears slid down Zelda's cheeks, not from sadness but from the overwhelming relief of being accepted so completely. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Eventually, when we are both ready. Owen kissed her tears away, murmuring promises against her skin about the life they would build together. And for the first time in years, Zelda let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have both independence and love, strength and partnership, herself and someone else. The next few months passed in a blur of activity and joy. The land purchase was finalized, and Owen began the hard work of building up the ranch operation. He hired 2 experienced cowboys to help with the initial setup, and together they constructed a small cabin, barn, and corral. Zelda visited when she could, helping where her skills allowed and learning about ranch work with genuine interest. She also continued running the Silver Strike with her usual efficiency, though she found herself delegating more responsibilities to Sarah and her other trusted employees. For the first time since Robert's death, Zelda was building a life that extended beyond her business, finding balance between work and personal happiness. Owen stayed in Eureka most nights, sleeping at Zelda's house when he was not at the ranch, and gradually their lives intertwined in ways that felt natural and right. They argued sometimes, both being strong-willed and opinionated, but they had learned to fight fair, to listen as much as they spoke, to compromise without either one dominating the other. In November, Owen brought his first small herd of cattle to the ranch, 50 head purchased from a rancher in California. Zelda rode out to watch him work, impressed by his skill and knowledge as he settled the animals into their new home. He moved among the cattle with confidence, clearly in his element in ways she had never seen before. "This is where you belong," she said that evening as they sat on the porch of his cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. "You were born for this life." "I am happy," Owen agreed. "But not because of the ranch, because of you. This is the dream, yes, but you are what makes it worth having." That night, as they lay together in Owen's narrow bunk, Zelda made a decision. "I want to get married in the spring," she said. "I want to be your wife, want to make this official and permanent." Owen propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her in the dim light. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel pressured." "I am certain," Zelda replied firmly. "I love you and I trust you, and I am ready to build our future together. Besides, if we wait much longer, people in Eureka are going to start talking about the saloon owner and her cowboy living in sin." Owen laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Heaven forbid we give the town gossips more ammunition. Yes, Zelda. Yes, let us get married in the spring." They planned a simple ceremony for April, inviting only close friends and business associates. Zelda refused to wear white, settling instead on a practical but elegant dress in deep green that matched her eyes. Owen wore his best suit, looking uncomfortable in formal clothes but devastatingly handsome nonetheless. Thomas Whitmore stood up as Owen's witness, while Sarah served as Zelda's. The ceremony took place in the small church on the edge of town, officiated by a circuit preacher who happened to be passing through. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, Zelda half expected someone to stand up and list all the reasons she was unsuitable as a wife. But the church remained silent except for the rustle of clothes and the occasional cough. "I, Owen Gallagher, take you, Zelda Dawson, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Owen said, his voice strong and clear. I promise to love you exactly as you are, to support your dreams and ambitions, to be your partner in all things. I promise to never try to change you or diminish you, to celebrate your strength rather than fear it. I promise to build a life with you based on respect, honesty, and mutual support. This I swear before God and these witnesses. Zelda felt tears threatening as she spoke her own vows, modified to reflect their unique partnership. I, Zelda Dawson, take you, Owen Gallagher, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you with my whole heart, to trust you even when fear tells me to protect myself. I promise to be your partner in building both our ranch and our life together, to support your dreams while pursuing my own. I promise to meet you as an equal, to argue with you when I disagree, and to stand beside you through whatever challenges we face. This I swear before God and these witnesses. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her with a gentleness that belied the passion she knew lay beneath. The small gathering erupted in applause and cheers, and Zelda found herself smiling so broadly her face hurt. The reception was held at the Silver Strike Saloon, which Zelda had closed for the afternoon. Tables groaned under the weight of food prepared by the town's best cooks, and someone had brought out a fiddle for dancing. Zelda danced with Owen, with Thomas, with several of the miners who had become regulars at her saloon, laughing and spinning until she was dizzy with joy. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah pulled Zelda aside for a private moment. "You look happier than I have ever seen you," she said, hugging her friend tightly. "I am so glad you found each other." "Thank you for believing in me," Zelda replied, "for pushing me to take a chance when I was too scared to try." "You did the hard part," Sarah said. "You opened your heart despite all the reasons not to. That takes real courage." That night, Zelda and Owen rode out to the ranch together, ready to begin their married life. Zelda had decided to split her time between Eureka and the ranch, spending 3 or 4 days a week managing the saloon and the rest of her time at the ranch, learning to be a rancher's wife while maintaining her own independence. It was not a traditional arrangement by any standard, but it worked for them. Owen never complained about her absences, understanding that the saloon was important to her identity and financial security. Zelda never tried to interfere with his ranch management, trusting him to make the right decisions for the operation. They fell into a rhythm that suited both of them, building a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. They argued sometimes, passionate disagreements about money or priorities or the best way to handle various challenges. But they always talked through their conflicts, always found ways to compromise that left both of them feeling heard and valued. In July, 3 months after their wedding, Zelda realized she had missed her monthly cycle. At first, she dismissed it as stress or the change in her routine, but when a second month passed without her courses, she began to suspect the truth. She waited another week before visiting the doctor in Eureka, not wanting to get her hopes up prematurely. Dr. Harrison confirmed what she had already guessed. She was pregnant, probably about 10 weeks along based on his examination. He assured her she was healthy and the pregnancy seemed to be progressing normally, though he cautioned her about the risks given her age. 27 is not exactly ancient, Zelda said dryly. Women have babies well into their 30s. True, the doctor agreed. But you are also very active, running between the saloon and the ranch. You will need to be more careful as the pregnancy advances, possibly reduce your travel in the final months. Zelda thanked him for his advice and rode back to the ranch in a daze, trying to process the reality of becoming a mother. She had wanted children once, had grieved the loss of that dream after Robert's death, and had convinced herself she was content with her life as it was. Now, Faced with the reality of pregnancy, she felt a complicated mixture of joy, terror, and wonder. Owen was working in the corral when she arrived, training a young horse with patient persistence. He looked up when he heard her horse approach, his face breaking into a smile that faded when he saw her expression. "What is wrong?" he asked immediately, vaulting over the fence and striding toward her. "Did something happen in town?" "Nothing is wrong," Zelda said, dismounting and taking his hands in hers. "At least, I do not think anything is wrong. I am pregnant, Owen. We are going to have a baby." Owen's face went through a rapid series of expression: shock, disbelief, and then pure, unadulterated joy. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around before setting her down carefully as though she might break. "A baby," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "We are going to have a baby. How are you feeling? Are you well? What did the doctor say?" Zelda laughed at his sudden protectiveness, even as she was touched by it. "I am fine. The doctor says everything is progressing normally. The baby should arrive in early February, based on his calculations." "February," Owen breathed, doing the mental math. "That means conception was probably in April, right around our wedding. Oh God, Zelda, I am going to be a father." They held each other in the middle of the ranch yard, both crying and laughing at the same time, overwhelmed by the unexpected blessing. Zelda had not realized how much she still wanted a child until the possibility became a reality, and seeing Owen's joy made her own happiness complete. Of course, the joy was tempered by practical concerns. Zelda worried about how pregnancy would affect her ability to manage the saloon, about the changes it would bring to her carefully balanced life. Owen worried about Zelda's health, about his ability to be a good father, about having enough money saved to provide for a child. But they faced these concerns together, making plans and adjustments as needed. Zelda gradually transferred more responsibilities to Sarah, training her to manage the saloon's day-to-day operations with minimal oversight. Owen took on extra work, breaking horses for other ranchers to bring in additional income before the baby arrived. As Zelda's pregnancy advanced, she found herself spending more time at the ranch and less in Eureka. The long rides became uncomfortable, and Owen fretted whenever she pushed herself too hard. She chafed against the restrictions at first, unused to being limited by her body, but gradually she accepted that this was temporary, a necessary adjustment for the sake of the child growing inside her. In late November, with Zelda 7 months pregnant and moving slower than her usual pace, Owen's 2 ranch hands left to find work elsewhere for the winter. It was normal for cowboys to move around seasonally, but it left Owen short-handed just when he needed more help rather than less. "I can manage," he insisted when Zelda expressed concern. "The herd is small enough that I can handle it myself until spring." "You will work yourself to death," Zelda argued. "Hire someone to help at least through the winter. We can afford it." Owen was reluctant to spend money on hired help when profits were still uncertain, but Zelda was adamant. Finally, they compromised by hiring a young drifter named Samuel, who had shown up looking for work. He was only 19, inexperienced with cattle but willing to learn, and he proved to be a hard worker who followed Owen's instructions carefully. Christmas arrived cold and clear, with snow dusting the mountains but leaving the valley relatively clear. Zelda had invited Sarah and Thomas's family to the ranch for dinner, wanting to share their first Christmas as a married couple with their closest friends. Margaret Whitmore was pregnant again, her 4th child, and the 2 women spent much of the afternoon comparing experiences and offering each other advice. "Does Owen hover constantly?" Margaret asked with an amused smile. "Thomas treats me like I am made of glass every time I am pregnant." "Constantly," Zelda confirmed. He tried to insist I should not be cooking dinner today. I had to remind him that I am pregnant, not an invalid. Men, Margaret said with fond exasperation. They mean well, but they do not understand that we are still ourselves, just with an extra passenger. That evening, after their guests had left and they were cleaning up the dishes, Owen pulled Zelda close and rested his hand on her swollen belly. The baby kicked against his palm and his face lit up with wonder. "I cannot believe this is real," he said softly. "That we made this, that there is a whole person growing inside you." "I can believe it," Zelda replied wryly. "This person kicks my ribs constantly and sits directly on my bladder. I am very aware of their presence." Owen laughed and kissed her forehead. "Just a few more months. Then we will get to meet them." "I am terrified," Zelda admitted. "What if I am not a good mother? What if I do not know how to balance the saloon and the ranch and a baby? What if I resent the restrictions and take it out on the child?" "You will be an amazing mother," Owen said with absolute conviction. "You are strong and smart and fiercely protective of the people you care about. Our child is lucky to have you." "We are lucky to have each other," Zelda corrected, leaning into his warmth. "I could not do this without you." "You could," Owen said, "but I am grateful you do not have to." The baby arrived on a frigid February morning in 1879, 3 weeks earlier than the doctor had predicted. Zelda woke before dawn with her water breaking and contractions already coming strong and fast. Owen rode for the doctor in a panic, pushing his horse harder than he should have in the icy conditions. But the baby was not willing to wait. Sarah, who had come to stay at the ranch for the final weeks of the pregnancy, ended up delivering the baby with only Owen's frantic assistance. It was a boy, small but healthy, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that worked perfectly based on the volume of his cries. "A son," Owen breathed, cradling the baby carefully while Sarah tended to Zelda. "We have a son." Zelda, exhausted but exhilarated, held out her arms for the baby. When Owen placed him in her arms, she felt a surge of fierce protective love so intense it took her breath away. This was her child, her son, and she would move heaven and earth to keep him safe and happy. "What should we name him?" Owen asked, sitting beside her on the bed and wrapping his arm around both mother and child. They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, but had never quite settled on one they both loved. Now, looking at their son's tiny, perfect face, Zelda knew exactly what felt right. "Daniel," she said. "Daniel Gallagher. It means God is my judge in Hebrew. I want him to know that he answers to his own conscience first, not to society's expectations or anyone else's judgment." "Daniel," Owen repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Daniel Gallagher, welcome to the world." The doctor arrived about an hour later, apologizing profusely for missing the birth. He examined both Zelda and the baby, pronouncing them both healthy despite the rapid delivery. He left instructions for Zelda's recovery and promised to check in regularly over the next few weeks. The first few months of parenthood were exhausting and overwhelming in ways Zelda had not fully anticipated. Daniel was a colicky baby who cried frequently and slept poorly, requiring constant attention. Zelda found herself perpetually tired, running on minimal sleep while trying to maintain at least some involvement in the saloon's operations. Owen proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with Daniel at night when Zelda was too exhausted to get up, changing diapers without complaint, and learning to soothe the baby's cries with a patience that amazed her. He also took over more of the household tasks, cooking meals and managing the cleaning so Zelda could focus on recovering and caring for Daniel. "I feel like I am failing at everything," Zelda confessed one particularly difficult night when Daniel refused to nurse and would not stop crying. "I am not running the saloon properly. I am barely contributing to the ranch, and I cannot even figure out how to comfort my own son." "You are not failing," Owen said firmly, taking the baby from her arms and settling him against his shoulder. "You are recovering from childbirth while caring for a newborn. That is more than enough. The saloon is fine. Sarah has everything under control. The ranch is fine. Samuel and I are managing. The only thing that matters right now is you and Daniel." "But I do not want to be just a mother," Zelda said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I know that makes me terrible, but I miss my work, miss feeling like I have purpose beyond nursing and changing diapers." Owen crossed the room and kissed her gently, Daniel still held against his shoulder. "That does not make you terrible. That makes you human. You can be a mother and still be yourself, Zelda. We will figure out how to balance it all, but you do not have to sacrifice your entire identity for our son." It took several months, but gradually they found their rhythm as a family. Daniel's colic eventually improved, and he began sleeping for longer stretches at night. Zelda hired a neighbor woman to help with childcare a few days a week, allowing her to return to more active involvement in the saloon's management. Owen continued handling the ranch with Samuel's help, slowly growing the operation as profits allowed. By the time Daniel was a year old, the ranch was starting to show real profit. Owen had expanded the herd to over 100 head, and the cattle were thriving on the Humboldt River rangeland. He had also developed a reputation for quality stock, which allowed him to command better prices when selling to markets in California and Utah. Zelda had restructured her relationship with the Silver Strike, transitioning from hands-on manager to primary owner, with Sarah handling most of the daily operations. It was an adjustment, letting go of that much control, but it allowed her to be more present for Daniel while still maintaining her financial independence. "I never thought this would work," Zelda admitted one evening as they sat on the porch watching Daniel toddle around the yard. "I never thought I could be a mother and a businesswoman and a wife all at the same time without failing at all of them." "You are not failing at any of them," Owen said, pulling her close. "You are succeeding at being yourself, which includes all of those roles." As Daniel grew from a baby into a toddler, his personality began to emerge. He was curious and fearless, constantly exploring his surroundings and getting into trouble. He had Zelda's green eyes and stubborn independence, combined with Owen's quiet intensity and love of animals. By the time he was 2, he was already following Owen around the ranch, trying to help with chores in his own clumsy way. In the spring of 1881, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news brought less shock and more quiet joy, tempered by the knowledge of how much work another child would bring. Daniel was still demanding at 3 years old, and the thought of managing a toddler and a newborn was daunting. But they had done it once and survived, learned from their mistakes and grown stronger as a couple and as parents. They would do it again together, building the family and life they had both once thought impossible. The second baby, a girl they named Emma, arrived in December of 1881 during a snowstorm that trapped the doctor in Eureka. Once again, Sarah ended up assisting with the delivery, joking that she should charge for her midwifery services. Emma was calmer than Daniel had been, a peaceful baby who nursed easily and slept for long stretches from the very beginning. "One of each," Owen said, holding Emma while Daniel climbed onto the bed to meet his new sister. "Our family feels complete." Zelda, watching Daniel gently touch Emma's tiny hand with wonder on his face, had to agree. She had built a life that once seemed impossible, had found love and partnership and motherhood without sacrificing her essential self. She was still strong and independent, still running a successful business, Still Zelda Dawson, even if she was also now Zelda Gallagher. The years that followed brought their share of challenges. There were droughts that threatened the ranch's survival, economic downturns that affected the saloon's profits, illnesses and accidents that tested their resilience. But through it all, Zelda and Owen faced each obstacle together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. Daniel grew into a serious, hard-working boy who loved the ranch and dreamed of expanding it someday. Emma turned out to be more like her mother, showing an early interest in numbers and business that suggested she might follow in Zelda's entrepreneurial footsteps. Both children grew up understanding that their mother was not like other mothers, that she worked outside the home and made business decisions and refused to fit into traditional boxes. "Why does Mama go to town so much?" Daniel asked Owen one day when he was about 7, a hint of complaint in his voice. Owen sat his son down and explained carefully. "Because your mother is a smart woman with talents beyond this ranch. She built a business before I ever met her, and that business provides for this family. More importantly, it is part of who she is, and I will not ask her to give up part of herself just because some people think mothers should only stay home." "But Tommy's mother stays home all the time," Daniel protested. "And that is right for Tommy's family," Owen replied. "But every family is different. Your mother loves you just as much as Tommy's mother loves him. She just shows it in different ways." It took time, but both children came to understand and appreciate their mother's strength and independence. They grew up in a household where both parents shared responsibilities, where business decisions were discussed openly at the dinner table, where a woman's ambition was celebrated rather than condemned. By 1890, more than a decade after their wedding, Zelda and Owen had built something remarkable. The Gallagher Ranch was one of the most successful cattle operations in northern Nevada, with over 500 head and a reputation for quality that attracted buyers from across the West. The Silver Strike Saloon remained profitable under Sarah's management, providing steady income that supplemented the ranch's more variable earnings. More importantly, they had built a marriage based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. They still argued sometimes, both too stubborn and strong-willed to always agree, but they had learned to fight fair and forgive quickly. They still made love with the passion of newlyweds, though now it was tempered with the comfortable familiarity of long partnership. On their 12th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Zelda with a weekend trip to Carson City, leaving the children with Sarah and Thomas. It was the first time they had been alone together for more than a few hours in years, and Zelda felt like a young woman again as they checked into a hotel and explored the city. That evening, over dinner at a fancy restaurant that made the Silver Strike look positively rustic, Owen took her hand across the table. "You remember what you said that night by the fire?" he asked. "When you told me you could not be what men want." "I remember," Zelda replied softly. "I was so scared, so convinced that I was fundamentally flawed." "I am glad you took a chance on me anyway," Owen said. "I am glad you let me prove that what you are is more than enough. It is everything." Tears stung Zelda's eyes, but they were happy tears, born of gratitude and love. "You saved me," she whispered. "Not by changing me, but by accepting me exactly as I was." "We saved each other," Owen corrected. "You taught me that real strength is not about dominating someone else. It is about standing beside them as equals, building something together that neither of us could create alone." They returned to the ranch renewed and reconnected, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. And there would be challenges, Zelda knew. The West was changing, becoming more civilized and less wild with each passing year. The days of the open range were numbered, and both the ranching and saloon industries would need to adapt to survive. But whatever came, they would face it together, partners in every sense of the word. Years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and milestones. Daniel graduated from school and began working the ranch full-time, showing a natural talent for cattle management that made Owen burst with pride. Emma surprised everyone by deciding to attend a women's college in California, determined to get a formal business education before taking over more of the saloon's operations. "She is so much like you," Owen remarked to Zelda as they watched Emma board the stagecoach that would take her to the train station. "Fierce and independent and absolutely certain of what she wants." "She is smarter than I was at her age," Zelda replied, wiping away tears she refused to acknowledge. "I let fear hold me back for too long. She is not making that mistake." In 1898, on the 20th anniversary of that first night when Owen walked into the Silver Strike with a business proposal and changed Zelda's life forever, they held a party at the ranch. Friends and family gathered from across Nevada and beyond, celebrating not just the couple's anniversary, but the success they had built together. Sarah, now running the saloon with Emma's long-distance guidance, gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. To Zelda and Owen, who proved that love and partnership can coexist, that a woman can be strong without being alone, and that a man can support without controlling. You built something beautiful together, and the rest of us are better for witnessing it. Later that night, after the guests had left and the ranch was quiet, Zelda and Owen sat on their porch watching the stars. They were both in their 40s now, showing the wear of years of hard work and hard living, but they were also happy, content, fulfilled. "You have any regrets?" Zelda asked, leaning into Owen's warmth. "Not a single one," Owen replied without hesitation. "Every choice I made led me to you, and that makes it all worthwhile. Even the arguments," Zelda teased. "We have had some spectacular fights over the years." "Especially the arguments," Owen said with a grin. "A woman who will stand her ground and tell me when I am wrong is far more interesting than one who just agrees with everything I say." Zelda laughed and kissed him, marveling at how after 20 years she could still feel butterflies when he touched her. "I love you, Owen Gallagher. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible to myself." "I love you too, Zelda Gallagher. Thank you for being brave enough to let me in." The new century arrived, bringing changes that would transform the West they had known. Automobiles began appearing on the roads, though horses still dominated rural areas like theirs. The mines around Eureka finally played out, and the town shrank as miners moved on to other opportunities. But the Gallagher Ranch thrived, adapting to new markets and new methods while maintaining the core values that had guided it from the beginning. Daniel married a schoolteacher named Rebecca in 1903, and they built a house on the ranch property to start their own family. Emma returned from college with a degree and a fiancé, a lawyer she had met in California who shared her progressive values and supported her business ambitions. She took over full management of the Silver Strike, modernizing it while maintaining its character, and it continued to serve as a social hub even as Eureka's population declined. Grandchildren arrived, first Daniel's twin boys, then Emma's daughter, then more over the following years. Zelda threw herself into being a grandmother with the same intensity she had brought to everything else in her life, spoiling the children shamelessly while teaching them the values of hard work and independence. "You are going to ruin them," Owen protested mildly when Zelda bought the twins their first horses at age 4. "I am going to give them opportunities," Zelda corrected. "Just like we gave our children. Besides, they need to learn to ride if they are going to help with the ranch." Owen just shook his head, smiling at his wife's rationalizations. After more than 30 years of marriage, he knew better than to argue when she had made up her mind. As they grew older, Zelda and Owen gradually stepped back from active management of their various enterprises, trusting their children to carry on what they had built. It was difficult at first, letting go of control after decades of hands-on leadership, but it was also liberating, giving them time to simply enjoy each other's company without the constant pressure of work. They traveled some, visiting Emma in San Francisco and taking a trip to Kansas to see Owen's sisters before they passed away. But mostly they were content to stay at the ranch, watching the seasons change and the grandchildren grow, secure in the knowledge that they had built something that would outlast them. In 1915, Owen fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. For a week, Zelda sat by his bedside, refusing to leave, holding his hand and willing him to fight. The doctor was not optimistic, given Owen's age and the severity of the infection, but Owen was stubborn and strong, and he pulled through against the odds. "You scared me," Zelda whispered when he was finally out of danger, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was going to lose you." "Not yet," Owen rasped, his voice rough from coughing. "I am not leaving you yet. We still have years ahead of us." And they did, though they were quieter years, marked more by contentment than ambition. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, surrounded by children and grandchildren and friends who had witnessed their journey from the beginning. They were in their 60s now, their bodies showing the marks of age and hard living, but their love had only deepened with time. 40 years, Zelda marveled as they danced together at the party, moving slowly to music played by their grandson. "We have been married for 40 years. "Best 40 years of my life," Owen replied, holding her close, "though I am still waiting for you to get tired of arguing with me." "Never," Zelda said firmly. "Arguing with you is one of my favorite hobbies." "I know," Owen said with infinite fondness. "It is one of the things I love most about you." They continued on, year after year, growing older together with grace and humor. Zelda remained sharp and engaged, still offering business advice to her children and grandchildren, still reading voraciously and keeping up with current events. Owen moved more slowly as arthritis set into his joints, but he still rode out to check on the cattle most days, unable to fully let go of the ranch that had been his dream. Their children worried about them, urged them to slow down more, but Zelda and Owen were determined to remain active and independent as long as possible. They had built their entire lives around the principle of self-determination, and they were not about to surrender that in their final years. In 1928, on the 50th anniversary of their first meeting, they took one last trip to the Humboldt River country, where Owen had first shown Zelda the land that would become their ranch. The cabin they had built was still standing, now occupied by Daniel's oldest son and his family, but the essence of the place remained unchanged. The grass still grew thick along the river, the mountains still provided their dramatic backdrop, and the peace that had drawn them here all those years ago still pervaded the valley. "You remember what I told you that night by the fire?" Owen asked as they sat on the porch of the old cabin, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "When you said you could not be what men want, you told me to be what I am," Zelda replied, remembering that pivotal conversation as clearly as if it had happened yesterday. "You said that was enough." "I was wrong," Owen said, and Zelda turned to him in surprise. He smiled and took her hand. "It was not enough. It was everything. It was more than I could have dreamed or hoped for. You were never just enough, Zelda. You were always extraordinary." Tears filled Zelda's eyes, and she leaned over to kiss her husband of 50 years. You gave me the freedom to become who I was meant to be. That was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." "We gave each other that gift," Owen corrected gently. "That was what made us work." They sat together as the sun set, two elderly people who had built a lifetime of love and partnership against all odds. They had proven that a woman could be strong and independent without sacrificing love, that a man could support without controlling, that two people could build something beautiful together while remaining true to themselves. Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1930, just a few months after their 52nd anniversary. He was 78 years old and had lived a full, rich life, but Zelda grieved him with an intensity that surprised her children. They had been partners for so long, had built so much together, that losing him felt like losing part of herself. But even in her grief, Zelda remained strong. She continued living at the ranch, surrounded by family, still offering advice and wisdom to anyone who sought it. She lived another 5 years, watching her grandchildren grow and welcoming great-grandchildren into the world before she finally followed Owen in the spring of 1935. At her funeral, Emma stood to give a eulogy that captured the essence of her mother's remarkable life. "My mother taught me that being a woman does not mean being weak, that loving someone does not mean losing yourself, that building a family and building a business are not mutually exclusive." She lived on her own terms, loved on her own terms, and succeeded beyond what anyone thought possible for a woman of her time. She and my father built something beautiful together, a partnership based on respect and equality that should serve as a model for all of us. They proved that love works best when two people stand side by side as equals, supporting each other without diminishing each other. That legacy will live on through all of us who knew them and learned from their example. Zelda was buried beside Owen on a hill overlooking the Gallagher Ranch, the land they had built together from nothing more than a dream and determination. Their headstone bore simple inscriptions that captured who they had been. Owen Gallagher, 1851–1930. He saw strength and loved it. Zelda Gallagher, 1852. 1935. She was herself. And that was everything. The ranch continued on through the generations, growing and adapting but always maintaining the core values that Zelda and Owen had established. The story of how they met, how a widowed saloon owner and a determined cowboy had defied expectations to build something extraordinary, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. And somewhere in the wind that swept across the Nevada rangeland, in the rustling of grass along the Humboldt River, in the eternal mountains that stood witness to it all, the spirit of their love remained, a testament to the truth that the best partnerships are built not on one person changing for another, but on two people accepting each other exactly as they are, and building something beautiful from that foundation of respect and mutual love.